I live on a sailboat full-time the last 4 years, and it's my home, it's my studio, it's my laboratory, it's my office, and I wasn't going to prepare a PowerPoint today, and I haven't prepared a PowerPoint, but I just actually uploaded this video on my small YouTube channel just a few moments ago so that you could watch something more interesting than me while I'm talking. And I just spent, and I'm not saying this to arouse sympathy, I just spent just over 2 weeks in forced confinement in a hospital on a small island down near Okinawa. And I got into sleep music about a year ago, helping me sleep at night on the boat. And I grew tired of the sleep music. I was watching YouTube, so I made my own music video. But you won't get the audio, you only get the images. But this is my boat. And I've been living on her for 4 years. And I've been sailing full-time on her for the last 2.5 years around Japan. And during that time, and I'll tell you more about this in a moment, the History Channel approached me to see if they could film my adventures and misadventures visiting remote ports around Japan. And so far I've been in 70 ports, and I've had many adventures and many misadventures as well. But let me just back up a little bit to give you a bit more context. I'm 68 years old now. On my 64th birthday, actually before my 64th birthday, I announced I was having a 64th birthday party in Tokyo and Nagoya. And I said, and at my birthday parties, for my friends in both cities, I'm going to be making 3 announcements. And so for a couple of months before my 64th birthday, there was a lot of speculation in my little pond of friends as to what those announcements may be. Even my own sons were kind of curious. What is Dad going to, is he coming out, or what's he doing? What's he doing? But my background is in the nonprofit sector, and running charities in 3 different countries, and 23 years ago with others founded an NGO here in Japan called Hope International Development Agency, and that's where most of my time was spent. But I've also been a part-time writer since the early 90s, and have written initially articles, and I call myself a lucky writer because I don't think I'm a very good writer, but I've been lucky enough to get paid to write over the years, and now on my 10th book. My 9th book is actually was to have been released last month, and I hope to have copies here to actually give away about 50 copies to all of you, and I don't, but it's been delayed, and the book is now coming out in November. And actually, while I was in hospital, I got the proofs sent to me, and so that was my last task, going through the proofs. I printed them off myself because I don't like working digitally. I prefer hard copy. But during all those years, I've been writing books. I've written books about anything the publisher would accept from me. I bring them ideas, always a British publisher out of Oxford. And one book was on boys becoming men, a book about male adolescent development, and the problems we face in Western society by the lack of puberty rites of passage. That was quite an academic book. That was the most difficult book I ever wrote. That took 19 drafts or rewrites before the publisher would accept it. My favorite book, and that's why I attended Patrick's session, just the previous session, my favorite book was, I had this idea of riding my bicycle from Kyushu to Hokkaido during cherry blossom season, and I just finished doing some postgraduate work and had written a dissertation on changing spiritualities among Japanese young people, and I discovered that, having been newly arrived in Japan 23 years ago, that Ohanami season is a wonderful season for open air festivities and under the cherry trees. And I thought I'd love to interview people underneath the cherry trees in as many prefectures as I possibly could. And the ideal speed is bicycle speed. So the publisher, Lion in Oxford, said, great idea. And they then commissioned me to write what they called in the deep travel genre, where I kind of skated along the surface. Not skate, I actually cycle across the surface, but the narrative is just skimming the surface And a particular important technique I learned then in writing deep travel is where you feel emotion in your journey, that's where you go deep into the description and really concentrate on all the senses and what you experience. It was my favorite book to write. That book was also went into Japanese, which was cool. And they paid for a bicycle to be made for me, and I stayed in Ninshuku and Ryokans and onsens, and it was absolutely wonderful. I hit 38 of the 47 prefectures by bicycle. The latest book I'd written was called Never Too Late, and that's what is kind of the predecessor to the book that's now being published, that's a companion book to the TV series. And that book was the easiest book I ever wrote. It was about midlife crisis. And it only took 3 drafts before the publisher accepted it, and then went through their kind of laundry machine, editorial-wise. And it's a nice 45-minute bathtub read, and it was my first attempt at fiction. Because part of that book is the story of a young man on a world journey, learning lessons. And again, I'm lucky because I'm not a great writer, but that book went into 4 languages: Russian, Portuguese, French, and of course English. So coming back to my 3 announcements, with that as the background, the 3 announcements I made were: number 1, it was time for somebody else to take over the leadership of the NGO that I had started and ran for many years. My Japanese is too rudimentary, and we really needed to step things up. We had grown. We got in the top 1% of NGOs in Japan from a budget point of view, which isn't saying much because the nonprofit sector is still very small in Japan. But now it was time for somebody to grow us further. So I was going to retire from that job, and we were going to hire somebody to take my place. Number 2, I wanted to return to speaking and writing, which I had done more of in my earlier years, and particularly to start a consultancy called Navigate 22 to help individuals and organizations navigate the complexities of the 21st century with the 22nd century in mind. I'm an environmentalist and kind of a CSR, not specialist. Well, specialist in the sense that's where I spent most of my time. And this, by the way, was in March 2019. And the third announcement was I wanted to realize a lifelong dream, buy a sailboat, live on the boat, and sail solo across the Pacific Ocean to the Great Pacific Garbage Patch by myself. And one of the reasons why I kind of delayed telling others about this goal is because when the goal came, the dream kind of became a goal, it seemed so outlandish and scary that I kept asking myself for months, really? Is that what you want to do? I've sailed a bit in my earlier years, and I basically know how to sail, but those were small boats. I courted my wife in a 26-foot Yamaha to Vancouver, and we go away on weekends together, and I loved sailing that boat in my younger years. And then when we lived in Europe, we went to Greece a couple times, went week-long cruises with a skipper along with us. And when we moved to Japan, because my wife, who was born and raised there, used to holiday at Yamanakako, we used to go there as a family when we moved here as well, and there were lasers on that lake, and I loved sailing lasers. But I'd given up on the dream that I could ever own my own boat and sail across an ocean, because now that I'm in Japan, the language is too arcane for me, and I'm from the nonprofit sector and don't have much money, so I just assumed it's very expensive. But then I discovered the Tokyo Sail and Power Squadron, an English-speaking sailing club in Tokyo where you can get your boat license through them in English at a fraction of the cost. I got that license, and that opened up this world of possibility to me that it's not as expensive as I thought. So I began to dream about this. I can get a boat. I could live on her. And then I just kind of came up, yeah, I'm going to get her, get a boat, live on her, sail across the Pacific Ocean. That seems very selfish. I'm an environmentalist, so I'll do it to the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, and I'll go and see my mom in Vancouver. Kind of that was the narrative that came together. And I announced all that at my 64th birthday party, March 20th, 2019. expecting, and to do that before I'm 70 years old. So I made the announcement thinking all of that would happen in 2020 sometime. Things sped up considerably. First of all, we found a successor in Hope take over for me within 4 months of my birthday party. He's still running it today, a friend of mine called Jeff Bear, doing a great job. And on the third point, rather than take a year to find a boat, I found a boat within 3 months as well. And within 5 months was living on the boat. I was already living part-time in Tokyo. Our family home is in Setoshi, not too far from the campus here. Then 2020 was no year to launch a new business. And so suddenly I had more time in my hands as we entered into early 2020 where I could concentrate on sailing. And so that's where I have spent my time since, on the boat. The History Channel, John Flanagan, the general manager of the, it's actually A&E Networks. A&E is owned by Disney Hearst, and they have a collection of a couple of dozen different channels, of which history is one of them, Crime and Punishment and cooking channels, etc., etc. And he heard about my endeavor, asked to see me. We met at the Tokyo American Club in Tokyo. I'm not a member. I only go there as a guest. He was a member. And he said, I think I'd like to talk to my colleagues about doing a documentary about your crossing of the Pacific. I said, you mean come on the boat with me? This is solo. And he said, no, we put cameras on the boat and we would get the data afterwards and then put together a 60-minute documentary for worldwide distribution. We talked about it. I discovered, this is one of the first things I discovered about TV, is that because it's a reality TV show, I don't get paid, apparently. And so, because you're the subject, I'm sure there's different deals with different reality TV shows, but he did say, but you would get exposure for your YouTube channel, which I have a small YouTube channel, and I thought, okay, I'll take that. And this is partly about me spreading the message about the importance of the world oceans. So that just gives me a bigger megaphone to share my views in the latter part of my life to the generation coming next. So I agreed. But I said, I'm not going yet. I mean, this is a few years off. I need to learn to sail this boat. I know how to sail, but now I've got a 40-foot boat, not a 26-foot boat. And so I'm going to just sail around Japan for 2 or 3 years. And they initially said, okay, well, tell us when you're going to go and we'll talk again. Well, 6 months later, they reapproached me. I was now in Kyushu, having left Tokyo Bay. And they contacted me and said, well, actually, while we're waiting, we'd like to do a TV show, a series with you, a travel show of sorts, basically with the theme, old guy, me, new hobby, sailing, exploring remote Japan, and the experiences you have there. And so we agreed I agreed initially to the pilot. I would not be paid for the pilot, although I did learn that if it goes to series, then I do get paid, because it's not reality TV now. I'm basically a TV host of a travel show. And then we began to look for where there was a place to film the pilot, and we chose Amami Island, which is kind of, has anybody been to Amami Island? It's not really typical Japan, but it's very exotic. And so I started to make my way there. And then there was the underwater volcano off of Izuhanto, 1,000 kilometers. I remember that temporary, this was 2 summers ago, that temporary island formed, and that Karuishi, the pumice field, floated down and flooded harbors in Amami and Okinawa 2 or 3 months later. And I was warned, don't come. I was almost there. I was a 3-day sail away. And so that was in November 21, I think it was. November 21. So then I diverted up to Nagasaki Goto. We decided to film there. I arrived in January 2022, a week before the film crew, to make sure I was there. And and then when I was there, Omicron came on the, I was going to say on the market, came into the marketplace society, and the mayor wrote John Flanagan in Tokyo and said, "Dame, you're not allowed to come," and I was kicked off the island. So then I had to go find another island to go to, and nearly sunk my boat going there to be rescued by the Coast Guard. Sailed then in some of the waters that Colin, who's also a sailor, has sailed in as well. So there's been lots of drama along the way. But amidst all of this, my book, Never Too Late, written many years before, had become my manual. I was finding inspiration from my own writing, thinking, yeah, those 10 tips I give to change the course of your life and Never Too Late, yeah, I need to reread those. And then my YouTube channel, very small, just under 5,000 now, but it's a very kind of niche channel, and most of my followers are Never Too Laters, and some of them started to call themselves as Never Too Laters because they had read my book as well. And so that gave rise to, number one, a business called the Never Too Late Academy, which I gathered a group of investors together, and we do online training and courses, production of resources, and it's a subscription basis. But also, everybody was saying, you need to write a sequel to Never Too Late, Never Too Late 2. It would be, they were suggesting it would be called. However, the History Channel had named their program Dare to Dream. And so I began to muse more around, because it is the theme of what I'm doing. I'm realizing a dream that I've had all my life, but I'm realizing it late in life. And so I talked to History Channel, and I said, is it okay with you if I write a companion book to the TV series using the same name? And they gave unguarded permission. They didn't expect any contractual relationship with them, but it would be very much be considered a companion book to the History Channel. Just as a side, and I'll get into the 5 things I've learned about writing a book with a companion book to the History Channel in a moment. Just as a side, we have filmed the pilot. We filmed the pilot on Ikijima about over 14 months ago, over probably a year and a half ago now. And it was a wonderful week of filming, and I know a little bit about the TV and movie business because my son is a film director, and he and I have a small company, and he owns most of it, but he's an award-winning film director, been nominated 5 times at Cannes Lion Film Festival, and he's won twice as Best Director for a short film out of Asia. So I know a little bit about that whole world. But to spend a week with a film crew who on one hand wanted to document my experiences with people, but yet because it's TV, they want everything scripted beforehand. So one of the lessons I learned just that, and my son advised me to do this, particularly with Japanese creative travel shows, where often the foreigner is just the mascot, and we're just expected to say, "Oshi desu ne," and wow. He said, no, you really need to push back and make sure they create space in the schedule where you can just have your experiences. Because what had marked all my visits to remote Japan thus far is the unexpected of what would happen. I think the first 20 ports I visited, I was so happy to get to port because it meant I wasn't scared anymore. But as I gained my confidence sailing, I began to eagerly look forward to a new port because I'd be anticipating what will happen here, who will I meet, and let me just tell you one little story. Is that I'm rounding the southwestern tip of Shikoku, and I've now been inspected by the Coast Guard 10 times. This was the 6th time. I was an hour from port. I saw them come out of Tosa Shimizu. They were heading that way. I was coming this way. I saw them stop. They're maybe like 5 kilometers away. They then point towards me, come to me, and for the next 3 hours at sea, bobbing around in fairly mountainous sea with a big stick with a basket for me to pass papers back and forth. They inspected all my papers, and I'm clean, but I'm an anomaly. Japanese registered vessel, foreign skipper, and I'm on what I found out later is a smuggling route from Taiwan. So fair enough. But it was one of the most aggressive inspections I've had by the Coast Guard. After 3 or 4 hours, they let me go. I finish my journey into harbor. I tie up. I spend 2 or 3. They weren't very warm, and they were cold and demanding questions. You know, why do you have radar? Why do you have VHF radio? And most of my fellow sailor friends say, just the Coast Guard can ask to see your papers, that's all. So just tell them to go on their way. But I kind of, I'm sailing solo, so I enjoy, this is all part of my experience, so I don't mind. I've got no appointments at port that evening. So I go into port, I tie up, takes 2 or 3 hours to get the boat settled, go looking to an izakaya. I find one with 5 stools in, 2 of them are occupied. I walk in, and here's the officer from the Coast Guard ship. And he's now red in the cheek, having been drinking a bit, and he stands up and greets me like I'm a long-lost brother, then runs out of the bar and disappears for 10 minutes. Turns out he ran home, came back with a Coast Guard t-shirt, said, next time we stop, you wear this. And then he took me sightseeing for 3 days in his car. So, I have so many of those serendipitous, like you just never know what's going to happen. So going back to Ikejima, I kind of had to keep the History Channel crew, give me space. Just let's see what happens. And one of the things that they were most frightened of, but they said it's now the best part of the program, is I was able to meet up with a squid fisherman and go out squid fishing for overnight one night. Absolutely fantastic experience. So they agreed I could do or I was going to say, when I arrived in Nagoya yesterday, flew up from Amami with my doctor's reluctant approval to fly, and I have to go back on Tuesday, back to the hospital again for them to monitor the situation. I feel perfectly fine, by the way. It's one of these ailments that you feel okay, but I guess they say it's a bit dangerous. Anyways, don't worry, I'm not going to collapse. I get home to my wife. We have dinner together. We sit down to watch some TV. I don't have TV, so I start channel surfing. My go-tos, Nat Geo, Discovery, and then History. And then I look, and here it's my pilot plane. I mean, they played it maybe 30 or 40 times in Japan, and now it's playing across Asia. It hasn't gone to series yet. The series is planned, but now they're at the business side of things, getting sponsors for each episode, deciding final locations. In the meantime, I wrote the book using the title from the TV series called Dare to Dream, and it has 3 parts. It's part 1 is memoir. It's called Memoirs of a Misfit Dreamer, and the publisher wanted me to tell the story. Where did this dream come from? And so that's part 1. Part 2 is a toolkit for people who want to realize an audacious dream. Everything from how do you, at an inspirational level, how do you navigate fear? What role does fear play in realizing dreams? To the very practical, how do you pay for it? And if you use your own money, how do you mitigate risk? If you don't have any money, how do you go out and raise money? In the burgeoning world of YouTube sailing channels, now which there's thousands, and a few years ago there was only less than a dozen. I'm a very tiny channel at 5,000 subscribers, but I have the bigger channels talking to me because I've been successful getting sponsors to pay for my dream. And it's the only real thing I brought to the whole enterprise, because yes, I know how to sail, but I know nothing about weather and charts, navigation, and diesel engines, which my sailboat has, and starting a YouTube channel and video editing. All of that has been a steep learning curve, but I've been raising funds since I was 12 years old. So I just had some natural, as well as relationships and connections. So I teach that in the book, and that's also on the Academy as well. How do you get sponsors for a boat? And I give very, very practical steps. So here's 5 things I've picked up along the way. The first 3 are just common to writing a book, full stop. So it'll be nothing new to any of you as fellow writers. But first of all, a book always starts with a book proposal. And a book proposal has the key elements in addition to your biographical information, including past publications. The key things is the blurb, which ideally should be under 150 words, the synopsis, which could be 1,500 to 2,000 words, and then a sample chapter, if you have it, or at least samples of previous writing, and your table of contents. Now on my 10th book, it's been the same process every time, whether it's with a new publisher or an old publisher. But what the proposal also does is it forced me to think, what is it I want to say here? So it always starts with a book proposal. I've signed a contract for a 10th book, which I can't disclose. In fact, this evening, this book is about somebody else, and tonight I'm having my 3rd session with that somebody else, doing interviews and writing that person's story, a business leader. And again, the book proposal has been very helpful, not only to get the publisher's attention, and tonight we also have a meeting with the publisher, with the same one I have for this book, called Lid Business Media. But that table of contents now gives us the railway tracks to run down as we create the content for the first draft. And that leads me to the second thing, is of course the first draft. Common sense to all writers, but a first draft is always for your eyes only, for my eyes only. It's where you just pour everything down, using your table of contents as a structure, to just write, pour. And for me, I need to do that in a specified period of time. All subsequent drafts I can dip into. I can create a few hours each week because I'm only a part-time writer. But for first drafts, I've always find with most of my books, I've had to devote 4 to 6 weeks and 4 to 6 hours a day. And for me, my peculiarity is I need a neutral writing room. So you think writing a book on a boat is a pretty cool place to write a book, but actually when I'm on the boat, I see everything else that has to be done. So I can maybe get 2 hours of concentrated effort in a known surrounding, but I can't get those 4 to 6 hours of concentrated effort. So I was in Beppu at the time. I was actually at a marina beside Oita Airport, but I rented a writer, I could just call it my writer's room. It was like a prophet's chamber with a 1 bed, a lamp, and a desk, and a sink, and paid 1,500 yen a night, and I just booked it for a month, and then extended it 2 more weeks. So first draft is always important, and then the third is with the whole editorial process with the publisher. Patience is needed. They're going to red pen your document, your manuscript. They're going to, and that just takes time. That's common to writing any book. The book proposal, the first draft, and then dealing with the editors. And there's multiple layers of editors for those who haven't written books. You have your commissioning editor that's helping you with tone and content and general approach. And then you have people editing from a convention point of view. Are you going to use digits or letters for numbers, punctuation, American spelling, British spelling, etc., etc. And then at the very final stage, you have the final proofreader, just to be careful about typos. But what's that? I'm confused. I'm very confused as a Canadian who lived in the UK. So two things that are unique, though, to writing a companion book for a TV series is, one is you got to be very careful to not contractually tie the two together. At least that's a choice I made. Some people said, well, couldn't history publish the book? Well, perhaps they could, but they are not book publishers. They are TV program makers. And I wanted to have a degree of independence because I'm not actually using scripts from the TV show. I'm just taking the same general theme, a book aimed at never too laters. Old guys, new hobbies, doing something different. And it was the same with my sponsors. I was very concerned that because I've gotten money for this dream, that the contracts had to, I had to be sure that the deliverables weren't, in fact, things I could guarantee delivery on. So while the notion is about me crossing an ocean, and that's why they sponsor me, that's their intent, they want to be identified with it, well, their promise is signage on the boat in a certain location and credits on the YouTube channel over a set period of time. So similar with History Channel, we just had to make sure that financially they're two completely separate entities. And but what I had to do was gain permission from them to use the title and permission to describe the book as a companion book to the TV series. On my group of investors for the Never Too Late Academy, because technically this book is owned by my company, Never Too Late Academy KK, and for which I have a group of investors, and they're also my board. One of them is a lawyer, so he helped me craft a very simple document that made it Betsu Betsu really separated. And then thirdly, I've kind of ignored, and that's a bit of a chaotic moment there. This was me prepping the boat for the typhoon that flew through in August, by the way. And I'm down in Amami and exploring the Amami Islands during typhoon season. So that's just to tell you where I am right now. That's Konya. And now I'm sailing back to Kenzone. And there's a nice music track that goes with this. And if you have trouble falling asleep at night, please go to my YouTube channel, Pacific Solo, and like, subscribe, and share. Onegaishimasu. My little plug. The other thing was that what I learned from my publisher and from the TV company, that historically a TV show does not fuel book sales to the degree that you think it would. And therefore, you still need a very strong marketing campaign. And it's usually does it.
Where
True.
the book drives the popularity of the series. It has its audience, you know, via New York Times bestseller list, USA Today, what have you. They get the excitement about the book first, and then that fuels interest in the TV series. But you're right.
Yeah.
The other way around.
Yeah, I think best-selling authors are when I was writing in England and we tried to get some American deals through an agent, they said 80% of the books sold in America are bought by someone for somebody else as a gift book, and therefore they only want celebrity authors. So a celebrity author will bring that, and you would know. Okay, so the other thing is what the point is, you really have to take marketing seriously yourself, and even if you got a paid publishing deal, that publisher still wants you fully involved in the marketing process. And so last night I have a set of obligations to help my publisher for them to support the book, because the UK version is being released November 7th. Which will also be the edition released into selected airport bookstores around the world, and then the US edition next spring, and it looks like we've nearly landed a Japanese deal as well. And next week the book is being, they're taking it to the Frankfurt Book Show, because that's where foreign language rights are promoted and sold. So really you need to have an omni-channel approach and get very If you're going to write a book, even if you've been paid to write it and the publisher has a marketing department, and even if you've got a TV show that's kind of alongside it, the author really has to put a lot of effort into marketing. And marketing today is different than what it was 30 years ago. My Chasing the Cherry Blossom book, back in released in the year 2001, there was all about book reviews in named publications, and it was the early days of Amazon. So I was watching the Amazon numbers as the book was released, and it was my only index or barometer. And I learned that the old adage is true: any news is good news. So one weekend, I had a very positive review in the Financial Times for Chasing the Cherry Blossom. And the next weekend, had a nasty review in the Daily Telegraph. And it stung a bit. And my wife always tells me, if you're going to get a book out there or put up a YouTube video, I'd appreciate not everybody's going to like it. So I think I have tougher skin now than I did then. What I noticed on both weekends, sales went way up on Amazon. And those were the early days of Amazon. But that's when book publishing was review driven. Now it's social media driven. And that's why if you want to be a published author with a book, whether you got a TV show or not, you have to be active in getting that book out there, getting landing pages made, and just have that omni-channel approach. Now, I could rabbit on. We have 13 or 12 minutes left, so let me just stop there, and we can either close early or you can make comment or ask question.
When you approached writing a companion book for the TV series, were you motivated by the fact that TV and film writing is so lean, so there's only so much of that dream that you can actually share in the space that they allot for you? And is that what drove you to write the companion piece? Because then you have a little more freedom to expound on the different things?
That wasn't necessarily the motive, but that's certainly true. TV is TV, and everything is very condensed. And the good thing about doing a pilot is that you learn about what you don't want the TV series to be. And the pilot, when we reviewed it later and had several production meetings since, I then pushed even further for the TV series. It needs more breathing space. And also with the TV show, because they wanted to script it, they kept saying, okay, can you be there at this point of time? And the number of times I would say in our bi-weekly phone calls, I'm on a sailboat. And my boss is the wind and the waves. And the only place I can guarantee to be is where I am. And the further something is away and the closer the time, the less the probability is being there. So we had this big meeting, and I was grateful for the executive creative director. That's not his title, but I'm going to using agency language. The head guy in charge of programming, who's based in Singapore for A&E Networks Asia, he called a big meeting together. He's a British guy, Chris Humphreys. He's been a champion of the series, and he was, although the production had been delegated to the Japanese company, so it was all Japanese crew, he got everybody on the call. There's about 12 people, and he was sensing some strain setting in between me and them because they were demanding I do this. I said, I was safety first, safety first, safety first. And then he got on the line, called a meeting together, and he said, listen, everybody, we approached Lowell with the idea to follow him on his adventures. And now you're trying to make him follow you. So we're going to go back the way this should be. And that's one of the reasons why we've delayed it a little bit too, because they want some certainty where I am. So we agreed we would now film Amami in Okinawa, and they're working on the sponsors for that. So there was that constraint with the TV. the book does allow me to say more. And to be frank, if there had not been a TV show called Dare to Dream, I would have probably written the same book and called it Never Too Late too. Yes.
A little bit at the beginning about point or at certain points, looking back now,
Oh, there's all kinds of pivot points in one's life, of course, and I think, and this is a tone in the book, is we all talk about our superpowers, and I think Berkman, who's a British columnist, kind of described it this way: that a superpower is the ability to endure discomfort with an ultimate goal in mind. So I've tried to foster that. So I want to be tenacious. I don't want to give up easily. And so even on this whole adventure the last 4 years, with all my misadventures, and more than one, when my life's been in physical danger, in this most recent time, which, by the way, is blood clots in my leg and lung, and they're concerned about going to the heart. This is the second round that this has happened. Totally my fault, because I had it happen 11 years ago, and ended up a few weeks in the hospital in Tokyo, and I've been on meds ever since, and a year ago I stopped taking the meds. So I'm lucky. I dodged a bullet on many fronts. But I think that perseverance, and I think, physical strength can diminish with age. Some specimens are, proof of the other, but for most of us, we muscle mass. But I think the perseverance muscle strengthens with age. So I think, that's important, and part of the book is I help people detect what their goals are, to find a goal and a dream that will actually be that magnet that keeps you pulling you forward towards the horizon. Certainly, there's regrets. If I hadn't done that, this would happen, or things that were foisted on me that I would never, whether it's the death of a son, which happened back in the 80s, our firstborn, or whether it was the tsunami that affected all of our lives, and I ended up being in Tohoku for the best part of 2 years. I would never wish for that to happen again, but boy, am I grateful for what I learned through those dark moments of my life. So, would I have choice to change things? Perhaps, but then again, no. And Patrick quoted Isabel Allende, the South American author who I've read a lot of, and she cites the same thing about her daughter and her daughter's death. And would she trade it? Well, of course, you want your child alive, but the riches that we gain through experiences that we would never wanted to plan. And so I think of when my boat nearly sunk off Hirado, I was scared shitless. I mean, it was, but now I can talk about it, and I learned a lesson about my propeller shaft. Yes.
Can you share any of your strategies, like fundraising, sponsorship?
Yeah. So I'm a big believer in relationships. I'll rely on Kartika too. I got 6 minutes left. I've been raising funds since I was 12 years old. 12 years old, I went on a Miles for Millions walk, 35 miles, Winnipeg, Manitoba. I just thought, oh, well, could I as a 12-year-old do it? Then I heard there was a fundraising element. We had to raise money for Haiti. And I discovered that not only did I finish the 35 miles, which was a huge sense of gratification, but even more so, thought, wow, I not only had an adventure, but I helped others at the same time. So I've been in the charity world all my life, and so I've been raising money for others all my life. When I came into Pacific Solo, I had to make that a business, not a hobby. I wasn't retiring from work. I was just passing my job and hope to somebody else. And so the things I intuitively did in raising money, I applied to the same thing, raising sponsorship for Pacific Solo. I've organized just under 100 charity galas in the last 20 years, 3 a year in Tokyo, but Singapore, Hong Kong, San Francisco, New York, all for for the NGO, and that's always a bit of a weird one because we're raising money for the poor and then having these grand affairs in hotel ballrooms, Ritz-Carlton, Hilton, etc. But I learned how to access corporate budgets and who do you talk to and what they want out of something, and what the win-win is. So it all starts with these steps. Number one is you need to first of all, you need to know what your goal is. What are you raising money for? But first of all, you make a list. And I always tell people, make a list of 30 to 50 names. So actually, right now, I'm putting together a team of Hope runners for the Osaka Marathon. We've been accepted to run as a charity group. And now I'm beginning to coach these people. Because I said, you need to raise a few $1,000s for Hope to join the team. And people are always scared of this. And I've done bicycle trips across Cambodia and Japan with the same. People have to raise a minimum of $10,000 for Hope. And I coach them on the fundraising, and it works every time. Starts with making a list. 30 to 50 people that you know, and sometimes they need help to dig deep. Well, I can only come up with 4 or 5 people. No, you start looking at relatives, work colleagues, chambers of commerce, your tennis club, whatever else. Then with that list of 50, there's 4 filters. You look at them, and with each one, what I teach people is grade each of the names on your list between 0 and 5 in these categories. And the first one is their capacity to give, donate, or sponsor. And you don't know for sure, but based on what you know about that person, are they good for $10, $100, Jumon, Hakuman? And just you kind of try to, what is the capacity for there to give? Secondly, accessibility. How easy will it be for me to get a phone call or go see the person? How close am I? And again, rate 0 to 5. 5 being always really good, and then the money side, lots of money, $100,000 plus, down to 1 is less than $100. And then accessibility, the same thing. 0, impossible. I can never see that person. There's no way I'd ever see Elon Musk. And 2, yeah, my wife has a bit of dosh. I can get an appointment. That's a number 5, or business colleagues. The third one is brand alignment. So to what degree does that individual or that company's story overlap with your goal? And that's where you have to do some research, particularly if it's company. And they may not be interested at all in your initiative, your project, or whatever, but or they may do. So you find if there's an overlap, again, rate 0 to 5. And then the fourth, which is really critical, is desirability. How desirous are you to work with that person? Because maybe they've scored a 5, it's an ante, and they've scored a 5 in all 3, but there's no way I'd ever want to complicate things in my family by taking money from her. Or there may be, I know people who've ruled people out because of politics. Whatever side of the fence, they just knew that they don't want to be that closely aligned. So you come up with that desirability factor. Then you add it up. So if the score's a 20, it's a no-brainer. You go to that person. But I say you create the following list. 15 to 20 is your primary list. 10 to 15 is your secondary list. 5 to 10 is your reserve. And under 5 is just no-go. You don't even waste your time. So you have to curate your list. Rather than just blast out an email to 50 people, you become very selective. Then after that, you have to know what your story is. What is your vision? What is it you're trying to do? I've done crowdfunding as well on Kickstarter for season 2 of the YouTube channel. I need to buy better equipment, both camera and everything else. And so for that, it was all small gifts, 96 people, a total of $10,000. But I went through the same process. And for that one, I came up with a list of 200 people. It ran 6 weeks, but it took 3 months to get it up because I learned some things they don't allow. So, because you give rewards to your donors, right? And so I was offering, like, at one point I offered a champagne for $5,000 if somebody came in. I offered a champagne sunset cruise on my boat, no alcohol. So then I have a store, Pacific Solo store. Okay, I'll give, rather than say you'll get a T-shirt with my Pacific Solo logo on it, I'll just give them a $30 voucher for my store, so they can buy what they want to on my store. And no, because that's money. You aren't allowed to give any monetary. So you have to learn, but once it's running, it ran 6 weeks.
So I know with book projects, the sweet spot seems to be about 15 minutes.
Right.
You can push it to 30, but more often than not, you're going to see the most action on your Kickstarter campaign for a book in the first 48
For a
hours.
book.
And then possibly at the tail end. But if you push it to 30 or longer, you're just going to have a lot of space.
Yeah. Yeah, and that'll be typical of me, because I saw that first 5 to 7 days way up, then it leveled down, and despite me pushing it, it didn't happen. But then 48 hours before end, I said I got this far to go, and I've still got this much shortfall. And in the end, I went 10% over. Yeah. I'm just conscious of time. Time is up. I don't want to take anybody else. Thank you, everybody.